Welcome to Sewing with Sandy. Today we're going to take Mood Sewciety jacket and trousers and make them up. It's a free pattern and we use this really lovely chocolate pantaroma from Mood. So the jacket has princess seams in the front. It's fully lined and we use this really wild bright red lining. It has a really nice shawl, lapel collar, and pockets. So inset pockets. And you're gonna love it. It's easy to do. It's great for a beginner. The trousers are fabulous. They are have a sewn-in waistband with a side zip and narrow legs, kind of wide. So the original pattern from Mood, the Ercilla suit, is made with a jacquard, a red jacquard. If you look on the website, you'll see it. And I'll put all the links for this stuff below. You'll be able to see it. And it looks great. It's a very unconstructed jacket, but with a little bit of princess fitting in the front, and then wide leg pants that taper down very narrow. Now the pattern is 2019, 2018, so it's a little old and it's a little dated, but these long jackets are back in, and you can always use a good pair of trousers. So we updated it a little bit by using this pantaroma, so it's knit and it's stretchy. And then for the pants, I tapered in the leg quite a bit. So because we're working with a pattern that was made for a woven, I cut it 2 sizes smaller and then sewed it with a small seam allowance, like a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So that made it like a size and a half smaller because you want negative ease on something that's stretchy like that. The pants, after that, the pants I ended up taking in another solid 2 inches on the inseam and 2 inches on the outseam, just because they were too baggy for a knit pant. But I love these pants. They are fabulous. All right, I have all my pieces cut out for my trousers and my jacket and the lining. And I'm going to start with the trousers. That's the first thing we're going to make. So I have the front piece and we're going to add the pockets on. And since I'm using this ponte that is the same on both sides, I put a pin on the right side when I cut it out, so I know when I take my pattern away that I don't have to worry about which piece is right and which piece is wrong. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put our facings into our pants pockets. So this is the right side, and you want this facing piece that has the angle on it. And again, I have pins on this, so I know which one is the right side right off the bat. I can pin this to this angled section. So if you're looking at the trouser leg this way, this is the crotch, this curved seam, and you have this funny little angle. That's the pocket. I'm going to put this right sides together. I think I cut my pocket a little long. That's okay, I'll just trim it off. And you want to line this side edge up. And normally you would line this top edge up, but mine seems to be a little long. I must have miscut it. That's right, I'll just trim it after. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other leg, right side facing up. I'm going to take my pocket facing, right sides together, line up this bottom seam down here. I don't know what I did with the pocket, that's weird. Of course, now that I'm stitching these things together, I can take these right sides pins out. So I'm going to stitch this line, just this line. That's all I'm going to stitch. I'm going to use, the seam allowance on this is 5/8 of an inch. You know, it's funny, it doesn't say what the seam allowance is. I typically use 3/8 of an inch, and when I made the test garment out of these pants, because this pattern is made for a woven and I used a stretch fabric, so I made a test garment for the pants, and then I used my lining for my jacket as my test garment. So my lining is all done and I made the alterations to that because it's on the inside and you don't care. So I used a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance on my test garment. It doesn't say on here, but my guess is that the seam allowances are 5/8 of an inch. So I'm going to go sew these and trim off this weird excess here that I did, and we'll be back to finish the pockets. All right, we've sewn on our pocket. We're going to press the pocket this way, away from the pants, and then you're going to turn it around and press it as the pocket facing underneath. And you want to get a nice press on this. You don't want any rumples or ridges on this seam here. And what you'll end up with is this really nice pocket edge. And I top stitch to that. You can go ahead and do that. I think that it makes for a much neater pocket. So these trousers are going to be pretty casual. Obviously they're made out of Pontoroma, so I'm okay with the top stitching on there. So the next thing I'm going to do is going to add my pocket. So I'm going to flip it over. So I'm looking at the wrong side of the pant. I'm going to take my pocket, find the one that has the right side, this one, and line the pocket up to the pocket facing. And what will happen is it extends right beyond this area, because this is where your hand goes in, and this part of the pocket finishes the side seam. So you get rid of that weird little gape. And we're going to lift this off of the pants. So we're going to sew this separate from the pants, and we're going to sew around the bottom and all the way up to the top up here. So it's just one quick seam around here and down around this way. So we're going to do that for both pockets. And then when you're done, you have a pocket that looks like this, right? Again, my pockets are too long. I must have shortened my pants and not shortened the pocket. So yeah, this is what you're going to end up with. You're going to end up with this little slot for your pocket. All right, I sewed, you can see from the back of this, I sewed the pocket to the pocket facing. And I like to serge around or overlock around the edge of my pockets only because I don't like to have to go back and fix the seam when I'm sticking my hand in there and I rip the seam by accident. So if you don't have an overlocker, just run a second row of stitching on it, it'll be fine. So now you have something that looks like this, right? You're like, oh my God, what did I do? It's wrong. Well, it's not, so don't freak out. You just need to fold it all into place. So what we want is the pocket all folded and tucked behind this neat little slash that we put in here. So you can see it's folded, tri-folded at the side and tri-folded at the top. And in order to avoid this as you're sewing, what you want to do is just do a quick basting stitch inside the seam allowance, just along that little tri-fold there at the side and along the waistband up at the top. And that will help keep this in place. Now it's one unit, so when I go to sew it together and sew the zipper in and everything, it'll all be one unit and I won't have this, right? Because this is where you're going to make a mistake. So it's worth taking an extra minute just to stitch that down in place. And I'll go back and do this side. So now we're on the move with our pants. Up until this time, I have used a regular straight stitch. I'm going to switch to the stretch stitch on my machine because these pants are stretchy. And you also want to make sure that you have a jersey needle or a stretch stitch needle in your machine. That will help go a long way to make your sewing a little bit easier. So we're going to sew this crotch seam. So we're going to put the two front pieces right sides together. I still, after all these years, lay everything on the table in front of me. I like to pin one end and then go back and pin the other end and then pin in between. Just line up those edges. Since you cut these pieces together, they should go together pretty easily. And also, while I'm doing that, I'm going to do the back crotch seam. So I'm going to take my back piece and I'm going to sew this big long crotch seam on the back. So I have a pin at the top. Now we haven't put our darts in yet, and I will do that. I want to make sure that when I try these on, that the darts are going to be in the right place. So I'm going to try them on before I put the waistband on, just to make sure that I'm going to have enough space with the darts, with or without the darts, or how big I want to make them. So it's kind of final, like a final little tweaking. And once you put the waistband on, you can't go back and fix it. So we'll do these crotch seams first, and then we'll move on to the inner leg seam and one of the outer seams. All right, we have our front crotch seam stitched and our back crotch seam stitched, and I overlocked it, but if you don't have an overlocker, do a second row of stitches there, because the last thing you want is split pants, and a second row, especially just down in this area, gives you a little extra security, if you will. And you can press these to one side, press one way and one the other way. What we're going to do is we're going to sew the inseam now. So this is my back and this is my front. And I'm going to lay them right sides together. So I have the right sides facing. So I have two legs, my two back legs, my two front legs. And the critical seam on this is this crotch seam. So we want one seam going to the left and one seam going to the right, and then you can just butt those seams together. And then I like to pin this down at the edge here, because you don't want to not pin. What happens is the feed dogs move the bottom piece faster than the presser foot on the top, and you know, if you've ever sewn a long seam and all of a sudden you get to the end and one piece is shorter than the other, it's because the feed dogs have been taking up all of that space. So I'm going to pin this, matching the edges all the way up. And you can stitch all the way to the center and then back down the other side. If you're a little nervous about that, then start here at the crotch and sew down one leg, and then start back at the other side and sew down the other leg. This fabric's heavy, it's falling off the table. So again, I'm going to pin this hem edge here of the pant. You know, these pants are drafted as baggy, and I did take them in quite a bit because I was using the knit, and I did go down a size, about a size and a half maybe, on the jacket and the pants, because I was using a stretch, and it'll fit a little differently than a woven will. You don't need all that extra roomy space in there. So you can see they didn't quite come together the way I wanted them to, so I'm just going to go back and repin this a little better. So the seam, there we go, the seam is flat all the way down and my edges meet. Like that. And I'm going to stitch that, and I am also going to stitch the side seam on the right side. I'm going to put the zipper on the left side of my pants. So if these were all sewn, the inseam was all sewn, they would look like this. Right? Right sides, if I had the right sides up. And I have, you know, now my pants are really starting to take shape, right? So this is the way I would wear them. I'm left-handed. I'm going to put the zipper on the left side. If you're right-handed and you want to put it on the right side, knock yourself out. There's no rules. But the side that is not getting the zipper, you want to stitch together. So I'm going to stitch this side together. So I'm going to flip them back around again, and I'm going to pin this side seam on the right side. I'm going to leave the left side open because we're going to put an invisible zipper in there. And you need the pants open in order to get the invisible zipper in. Okay, and again I'm going to go back down to the edge, pin this edge so it's nice and even, and then go back. And remember, your back leg piece is wider than your front leg piece. So some people say, oh, they don't match, they don't go together. Well, they don't, because our backs are bigger than our fronts in general. So the back pieces tend to be wider. So you have to, that's why you match the edges, and that's what gives it shape, it gives it dimension. So I'm going to sew the inseam all the way around, and I'm going to sew the right side seam. Then I'm going to try them on and see if I need to add those darts in the back. I'm just going to pin them down the left side that isn't sewed, just where the zipper is, because really I just want to see if I need to take those darts in if they're too baggy in the back. So now the next step is to do the facing. Couple of things about the facing. In this pattern, there is one facing piece to use for both the front and the back, and if you change the size of the waist through a fitting process, which is something that I did, and make the darts bigger or smaller, or in my case, I'm not putting the darts in because this is really stretchy and I made it super snug, so I don't need the darts in the back. I need to create my own facing, right? I can't use this pattern. It won't work. It won't fit on these pants. So I'm going to create my own facing. I'm going to show you how to do that. I have my fabric here. This fabric is great, but it's heavy. All right, we want to create a waistband for these back pants. And this is the back. I did not put the dart in, so this waistband isn't going to fit. If I put the dart in, then that would change the width of my waistband. And the waistband gets smaller as it goes up, right? Because your body goes this way. So we want to measure the pants from one edge. We need to make two of these from one edge. And if your stretch only goes one way, make sure that it's going the way of the waistband, right? And this is the center, back center of my pants. And I want this piece, the bottom of this piece, where it's convex, is that correct? Where the circle goes out, is going to sew to the top of my pants, right? Because that's the way that my pants get smaller as they go up. So what I want to do is I want to measure from this rounded portion, but I need to, this is the center, because this is the center of my pants, but I need to bring it all the way out to here. This is where I need to have the end of my facing needs to, my end of my waistband needs to go out to here. Does that make sense? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin my waistband in the middle. And I only did make one mark, so I'm just going to use that mark. I'm going to cut my waistband on an angle, just the way this one is. And I'm going to have to measure this over on this side. I'm going to cut the bottom. And you can see how much I've added, and that's basically because I didn't take the dart in on my pant. But now I have the right shape, and I'm going to fold this in the middle, just where the pin is, just so I can determine the length on the other side that I didn't measure, right? And I want to get the same angle. I'm going to fix that. So now I have a waistband that is a little bit longer than the original pattern. And essentially it's the distance of that dart that I didn't take. Two darts, one on each, one here and here. So that's my back waistband. Now my front waistband, and I need two of those, and you're going to interface both of them. I don't think, because this pant aroma is super heavy, and because of the knit factor and the way these pants are going to fit really snugly, I'm not going to interface these. But if you make them with a woven, they recommend that you interface both pieces. So I am going to not interface mine, but again, if you're making a woven, you should seriously consider interfacing, because it will help the structure of the garment stay up. Next step is to sew the waistband, one side of the waistband, onto the pants, because the zipper is going to go all the way up to the top of the waistband. So I'm going to take, this is my front waistband, and this is my back waistband, and I'm going to sew them together so the opening is on the left front. Right? So if you remember correctly, this is the bottom of the waistband. Right? This is the bottom of the waistband, and this is the bottom of the back of the waistband, right? Because it's got the bigger curve. That's the bottom that gets attached to the top of the pants. And if this is the front and I want this left side open, if this is my front piece and I want this left side open, and I need to sew these right sides together, this is going to be the piece that I'm going to sew to it. Nope, this is going to be the piece. So this is why we test stuff out. This is going to be the piece that I'm going to sew to it, and we're going to have one big long waistband. And I'm going to do the same thing with these two. I'm going to sew them together in the reverse, because that's going to go on the underside. Is that as clear as mud? I suspect it probably is. But one front waistband and one back waistband, and you sew them together here at the side seam. So when you open them up, you have a front and a back with the big curve on the bottom, and this open on the left side, right? This is the right side of my fabric, because this is where the zipper's going. And then we're going to do the same thing with the two back pieces, except they end up being the opposite because they're on the inside of the garment. It's actually the facing. All right, so the next step is to sew this on. So I'm going to go sew these on, sew them together, and then I'm going to sew one of them, this one, on my pants. And then I'm going to put the zipper in, and I will link the instructions for how to put an invisible zipper in below, in the link below to the website post, and that will show you how to put an invisible zipper in. So I'm going to go do that. When I come back, we'll finish up the waistband and hem our pants, and they are done. Cool. All right, look at this. Our pants are almost finished. I added my waistband all the way around and left the left front open, left side open, and then added my invisible zipper, which looks great. Look at that. Beautiful. And then finished stitching down this leg, tried them on, determined the hem. So I just serged the edge, and I'm going to turn the hem up an inch and do a twin needle stitch on that, and I'll put the instructions to my twin needle video in the stuff down below in the blog post. And it's really important that you use a twin needle stretch stitch on the fabric, on a stretch fabric like this, because if you don't, it's going to pop, just like the side seams where we're using a stretch stitch. So finishing stitches that are going to have to expand and contract should be twin needle, because you have two needles going down and the bobbin goes back and forth between the two of them, and that gives it mobility. So here we have our waistband, half of our waistband, and I'm going to take the last step I'm going to take is our other piece of waistband, and we're going to sew it along this top edge here. So remember, this wide part, the outside curve, is at the bottom of the pants. So I'm going to flip this over, match up my side seams. You can see I matched up my side seam with the waistband. That looks great. And I'm going to do that again. Just flip the seam to the opposite direction, binding them together. So the smaller part is what I'm sewing, the smaller part of the piece that's on my pants, and the smaller part of the piece that is on that I'm attaching, the facing. And I want to make sure that my zipper is folded back when I pin this, and I'm going to leave an overhang of the seam allowance, because when I turn that around, that will finish off the back end of my zipper. So here is my piece that it's getting attached, and I have this little extra flap because that seam allowance is taken up with where I sewed the zipper on, and that will happen on both sides. And I'm going to stitch this just like I have stitched everything else. And then with this, this fabric, with this Pontoroma, you don't have to finish the edges, but I will. I'll finish this extra edge of my facing, because this is going to go down in and then get stitched to the seam allowance and cover everything inside. And then we're finished. We are done. Put a little hem on them, and we're going to move on to the jacket. So I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to make sure that my zipper is flat the way it's supposed to be. I don't want this tape open. I want it flat, and I'm going to extend the seam allowance of my facing, my waistband facing, over my zipper. All right, so I'm going to stitch this, and I'm going to I'm going to stitch this. I'm going to stitch this all the way around at the top, serge it. I'm going to finish up this right edge, and when I come back I'll show you how a couple of different options for finishing off the waistband internally. Okay, as promised, we are almost finished. I twin needle stitched my hem. So there's a twin needle stitch running along the top here, and then a single bobbin running across the bottom. And then I stitched on my second piece of waistband. So I have the waistband now and the waistband facing, and now we're going to turn the facing to the inside. So you want to press the seam allowance to one side and then press this so you have a nice seam up here on the top. And for the edge where we have this overhang, you're going to fold this in, fold the raw edge of the facing in and bring it down so it covers, it's a little fiddly, so it covers the back side of the zipper and finishes off the inside. So I did this one already. So you can see I've folded my facing down and I've pinned it there, and I'm going to hand stitch that to the back of the zipper. I'm also going to hand stitch my facing down. I'm going to turn it. I've pressed it, and I'm going to, I like to pin the top edge because I don't want that shifting on me. So I'm going to pin the top edge. And then I'm going to fold the bottom edge down so I can stitch it to the seam allowance, and you won't see anything. So it's nice and clean on the inside. You won't see my seams, you won't see any of the finishes. Alternatively, you could stitch this down with the machine through this side right there on that stitch in the ditch. It's tricky. You don't want to do it with a knit. You could do it with a woven. With a knit, you'd have to use your knit stitch because that needs to stretch. But for a woven, you could do it. I think if you're going to wear something tucked into your pants, it can look messy unless it's perfect. So in my book, it's just easier to hand stitch this. I usually just sit down while watching TV and I hand stitch it. It doesn't take that long. So then these are done. They look great. I am so happy with these pants. I really like the way they fit, and if you know me well, you know that I love Silhouette's woven yoga pants, and I wear those all the time. This is a really nice alternative because it has the waistband and the zipper, and the other ones just have elastic waistband. So now we're going to turn our attention to the jacket.